Welcome to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. This is author interview number 859. As we record this, celebrities appearing on the 33rd season of Dancing with the Stars recently were announced. They include two Bachelor franchise stars, two medal-winning athletes from the Paris Olympics, two stars of huge 90s TV shows, and a convicted con artist who'll be competing while wearing an ankle monitor. Well, how does that connect with today's interview? It's an indication of the growing popularity of dance in the country. And our guest today knows what she's writing about. She is a real former life ballerina. Lucy Ashe is an English teacher. After training at the Royal Ballet School, she decided to change career plans and go to college. She studied English literature at St. Hugh's College, Oxford, before receiving her teaching qualification. Her poetry and short stories have been published in a number of literary journals, and she was shortlisted for the 2020 Impress Prize for New Writers. What she's got is a wonderful way of combining two of her passions by writing compelling novels centered around the world of dance, particularly ballet. Her latest is The Sleeping Beauties, and we're very pleased to welcome Lucy Ashe.
Thank you. That's a lovely introduction, and it's great to be here.
Yeah. Before we get into the book, I want to find out a little bit more about your dancing background and career. Did you have a favorite role or a performance you were particularly proud of?
Yes, I suppose my main memory of performing was when I was in the Nutcracker every year when I was at school as a mouse. I was a mouse many times, and of course, as a mouse, it's a small role. But you are part of that world of the theatre, the magic making of the theatre. But one year, I was given the role of being what's called a naughty child, and I absolutely loved that. So even though that was small roles in my childhood, I suppose. It was on this huge stage, Covent Garden, the Royal Opera House. I have very fond memories of those first performances.
Was there an incident or a series of incidents that said, this is probably not where I'm going to go and led you to switch?
Well, I started ballet when I was very little, and then I went to the Royal Ballet Junior Associates from the age of 7, and then I went to the Royal Ballet boarding school from the age of 11. And when I was coming to the end of those years, I was 16, 17, I had to make a decision about whether I went on to train at another boarding school or another ballet school, or whether I went to university.
Mhm.
And I couldn't really leave ballet behind, but I knew that it wasn't quite working out for me in the way that I needed it to. I have a curved spine and my hips don't rotate out
Mhm.
enough. I was getting injured. So I had to make a decision. It was a really difficult one. So I went to Oxford University. I was very lucky to get a place there and studied English literature, but I still couldn't really leave ballet behind. I did a dance teaching diploma on my weekends. I would go to London on my weekends and take this dance teaching diploma. Still performed freelance. I did one performance in Tokyo, for example, which was incredible. But when I became an English teacher, I just couldn't train enough. I think as a ballet dancer, you have to train every day.
Mhm.
And I was starting to be training like twice a week, and it wasn't enough.
Mhm.
So I had to let it go, which was very, very difficult. But I suppose for me, it's been wonderful to return to ballet with my writing and writing my first novel, The Dance of the Dog, and then with The Sleeping Beauties. It's been a really wonderful return to dance.
Um, I have to say, I read the book before I looked at your bio, and I was very pleased to discover you have published poetry because one of the questions I jot stuff down as I read, and I said, she must be a poet as well because there's a certain lyrical quality to the Sleeping Beauties, and I was delighted to find it was true. Is your poetry about dance or other subjects?
I don't think I've ever written a poem about dance, actually. I love writing poetry. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I would only be able to write a poem when the idea came for me. Usually, when I was on a run, actually, I'd think, "Oh, this is an idea or a kind of a concept that I need to write out in some way." So poetry is an exploration for me. It's an exploration of ideas, of emotions. I remember writing a poem about a woman trying to get out of the door over many, many centuries. And she was wearing different clothes from those centuries. So the kind of clothes that someone might wear in the Renaissance time compared to now. And all of these clothes were getting in her way as she tried to get out the door. And I suppose for me, it was about what women wear as being very representative over the years of their place in society and the freedoms that society offer them. That was a fun poem to write.
I can see that. Well, I want to mention because that leads me into where I was going to go a little bit later, and that is talking about the fact that you are have minor characters that are fully fleshed out. And I want to ask you, do you write backstories for them that you don't use in the novel just to get that concept?
Yes, definitely. I would say I'm not writing it out, but I'm definitely thinking about it a lot. One of the things about writing is that you have a lot more in your notes and in your mind that can ever go down on the page. And sometimes my editor or my agent will say to me, like, you've told us quite a lot, and it's great that you know it, but you probably can take that out because your reader doesn't need to know it all, or you can tell it very, very briefly. You know, you can tell it with a
Mhm.
small phrase can tell you a lot about someone's character. But there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, certainly.
Oh, what in fact was one of the other notes I wrote was she's excellent at telling character. And the one that first grabbed me was I'll read this short sentences with long legs and a strong, lean frame. Her default look is a classical statue drowning in gardening clothes, thick sweaters tucked carelessly underneath overalls. What a perfect picture in one sentence. That's
Thank you.
the economy of a poet there.
Yeah, I do like to be able to really visualize what I'm writing.
Mhm.
If I can't see it, then the reader's not going to be able to see it, and I do think that comes out. But for writing descriptions of the setting of people, they have to be closely connected to the character for me. So
Mhm.
I will not be including a description just purely for scene setting. It has to represent something about the drive of the character at that point. How are they seeing the world around them? Is it because they want something at that moment? Are they afraid? Do they desire something? So I think that for me that those descriptive moments work because they are linked to character.
It's who they are, is what you're talking about. Yeah, not how they. So I'm afraid I don't. There's some fascinating things that I do not want to give away in terms of spoilers. Perhaps you could do a summary of the plot because we really should tell people what this is about. It's a fascinating book.
Yeah, so The Sleeping Beauties is a historical mystery. It's set at the end of the Second World War, and it starts on a train. There is a woman called Rosamund Caradon who is returning evacuees to London from her Devonshire manor in the English countryside, and she has her daughter Jasmine with her. But she's feeling very sad about sending these children back. She's become very fond of them and fond of her role as the sort of super mother. And into the train carriage walks a beautiful ballet dancer called Briar Woods. And Briar takes an immediate interest in Jasmine. She starts inviting her to come and see ballet performances. She visits them a few months later at their house in Devon. And this friendship is very worrying for Rosamund. And throughout the book, we see the ways in which their lives have become dangerously entangled and how experiences from their past keep replaying and binding them together. So the while the characters are completely fictional, it is set among well, the backdrop of the novel is the real work of the Sadler's Wells Ballet Company, the company we now call the Royal Ballet Company, during the Second World War. And I was just amazed in my research about the energy of ballet during the war and the tremendous efforts of this company to bring dance to so many people during a time of conflict. And the other element of the book is the Sleeping Beauty. I would say it's a kind of dark and gothic retelling of the fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty.
It is, and you've actually embedded at least one fairy tale in it about the white cat as well. So be looking for that when you read the book. Um, there's so much thing going on, and I have to say the apotheosis for me. I hope I'm using that word correctly. This kind of coming together of both of your interests took place in, I'm going to find the quote right here. Planes were flying in from the direction of Rotterdam, their wings flashing in the sun. As they approached a field not far from the city, they ducked their noses and rose again, a perfect balancé with a sweeping port de bois. I have never heard more planes described as ballet movements before. It's achievement. It's a classic.
Well, that moment was fascinating for me because it's based on a real story of something that really happened. This ballet company was sent to Holland, to The Hague in May 1940. It was a kind of cultural propaganda moment. They were sent by the British Council. But while they were there, Germany invaded, and the Netherlands were no longer neutral. They were drawn into the war. But this ballet company was there. They were trapped there, and they had to be evacuated. And there's a wonderful journal about this by a dancer, a corps de ballet dancer called Annabelle Fargent. And I was so lucky to be able to read that and sort of find out what did the dancers, or how did the dancers experience this very dangerous moment? You know, anything could have really have happened. There were planes flying towards them. But what they did is they went up onto the roof and had a look at their hotel, and they had absolutely no concept, it seems from these journal entries, of how dangerous it was until afterwards, until they got home. They were so kind of wrapped up in the performances they were supposed to be doing, and you know all of these different elements of dance, that I felt like it was totally plausible that they might think of a play as a sort of dance movement. Um, it's it's this sort of combination of traveling to this country to dance, but also finding yourself in the midst of a war. It reminded me of how dancing can feel quite interior, quite insular sometimes
Mhm.
when you're training. I certainly felt this at the Royal Ballet School. I was just completely immersed in this world. It was a boarding school, so and the school was literally in the middle of a park. We were surrounded by deer.
Oh, my.
There was nothing else there. It was beautiful, but it was completely isolated. And this idea that ballet kind of draws you in, and you become obsessed with that world that you're in, um, was really interesting to me.
Fascinating. I mean, how long did it take you to research this? Because it feels like it's a very fully realized book.
So the research started immediately after I finished writing my first book, The Dance of the Dolls, because it's sort of, even though the books are completely standalone, you don't need to read The Dance of the Dolls to read The Sleeping Beauties. They are set in the same world of ballet in the 1930s and 1940s. And
Mhm.
I had started becoming already very interested in what happened next for this ballet company. My first book is set in 1933, and I just kind of kept reading. And I thought, well, I need to write another book then, don't I? So that I can continue with these stories that I have been loving and researching. So I would say probably about 6 months of reading and research and thinking, and then I had to start writing because you can research forever.
Oh,
So I
yes.
came up with my plot, and it only took me probably under a year to write the book.
Mhm.
But with historical fiction, you know, you're writing, but you're also stopping a lot to go and research something that you need to research for it. So it can be a longer process than
Yeah.
some writing.
I'm familiar. And one of the things that it struck me is, in a way, the war is a character because it affects everything other characters do, all the rationing. I mean, one of the sweetest little parts is where they talk about sending sugar to the dressing rooms because that's precious. It was rationed. We don't know about that world. That's different to us.
Yes, that was something I was very interested in when I was reading the different memoirs, and it was actually Margot Fontaine who writes about this in her autobiography. She's probably one of the most famous British dancers, and she really kind of she was one of the earliest members of the company we now call the Royal Ballet Company. But she talks about how they were always hungry during the war when
Mhm.
there's dancing because they were performing so much. They were performing like several performances a day. They were on train journeys going around the place and often in freezing conditions. So to be sent these little packets of butter, chocolate, sugar from ballet fans meant a huge amount to them.
Yeah. I think one of the other aspects that kind of surprised me was the government support of during the war, and this is not something governments are always accustomed to do.
Yes, I suppose I was writing this post-COVID, but I was thinking about in that time in COVID, it was another conflict, not a conflict as such, but a crisis, and how we tried so hard to keep theatre and the arts going in a sort of remote way, with online performances and that sort of thing. But it's hard, it was very hard to do that. And I thought about how it meant so much to so many people during the Second World War that performances did continue and people could come together in this way. So the theatres did close initially in London when the war was first declared, but not for very long. I think it was just a few months, and then they opened again. Partly because we call that first stage of the Second World War phony war, because there
Mhm.
wasn't actually much fighting going on in England, there weren't any there wasn't any bombing, etc. At that point. So the theatres reopened, and there was a lot of support for it. But
Hmm.
one thing I found really fascinating was I managed to get hold of a few little programs from the 1940s from different theatres. And they have announcements in them about what happens if there's an air raid and the air raid siren goes off. And they say, if you wish to leave, you can. All we ask is that if you do, you go quietly and without excitement. And I just loved it. The show must go on. Um, so,
This is a very British way of approaching things, I would have to say.
yeah.
Decorum is important. Um, one of the things that I enjoyed is and I had to look up some of these people because they're not from my milieu, but every time you see a character in there, pretty much you did sprinkle it with all real people, real characters, real events, real things. That gives it that additional realism, I guess.
Yes, for me, it was really important to make sure that any performance that I was describing, any ballet tour, that sort of thing, it was based in real historical research and events that had happened. But of course, I didn't want to be making these characters, these real people, people who they weren't. I didn't want to be putting words in their mouth. I didn't want to be creating this whole kind of conflict around them. So they're there. They're very important as part of the lives that people were living. But I don't give those characters like a real central role. The main characters are fictional, which was helpful. I think I would have found it a whole other type of writing if I was trying to make Margot Fontaine my main character, for example. I don't think I would have been able to do that.
Right. Well, I have to say that she was one of the first names that I recognized from my limited execution in that department. But I think of them as seasoning. You're salting them through there to give that extra flavor of the times.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's probably a fair way to look at it. But also I just couldn't resist because I just loved researching all their stories so much, and I did think it's important to tell these stories of dancers' lives during the Second World War. I don't think it's an area of the 20th century we necessarily look at a lot in sort of the mainstream media. I think some of these stories would be known by like your most devout ballet fans, but
Mm.
not really more than that.
And I think you are doing a great job in popularizing it and bringing it out to more of us in the masses who wouldn't normally think to pick up a book just about ballet, but uh, really fascinating. But one of the things that I really enjoyed, some of the minor characters, Alice Woods, for instance, and her millinery shop, where your descriptions of it are just fabulous. And the fact that she is so careful when somebody comes to that who is not of the right class or not at what's appropriate for use in the country is not the same as what is in the city. And she's very careful to guide them along that. I thought that was an intriguing aspect of British class society.
Yeah, and I think yeah, British class society that was very important to people at the time. And wearing the wrong hat to the wrong event, it would have been a big deal. And Alice, her character, she is a very sort of rational, thoughtful person. She's very caring, and she's not driven by emotion too much, but she does really care about people. And I think she sees her role as this hat maker as like, being kind of part of the community and making people helping people fit in who have just come from maybe the city and they're struggling with countryside life. So it was just like a small little feature of her character that I think I tried to show through the way in which she interacts with her customers.
Yeah, it's really a great deal of fun. Um, Gosh, one of the things that I'm going to scratch through because I had so many notes. I take notes when I read. I've got 18 pages of notes from yours, and I won't hit them all, but I'm trying to go through and find the next one that I thought was really intriguing. Um, Gittisham Manor, you described that so well, and it's a real place. Did you visit in anticipation to set up for this?
You're the first person who's asked me about this.
Oh.
So it's actually, yeah, it's based on a hotel that I went to with my husband one
Mhm.
Christmas, on Christmas Eve. My parents live in Devon, so I go there quite a lot and I go and visit them. And this little village of Gittisham, it has this beautiful town called Pig. And when I was there, I just sort of fell in love with this house, and I did some research on it. They had quite a lot of books around and information, and I thought, this was a family manor house during the time. It sort of passed down by different families until it was bought, as many of these British manor houses are. Most of them get bought up
Mhm.
by corporations,
Yeah.
sadly. But this hotel had done a really beautiful job, and we were staying in the stables. That was the room we had as as our hotel room. It was the stables that had been separated out, like one section, like stable bit for the bed, one for like a bath. And I just spent the weekend that I was there, kind of wandering around, thinking about how wonderful this place would be for a setting.
Nothing is ever wasted to an author. And I think that's one of the things. You just use everything that you have beside it. A little bit about structure. You start out in third person, then you switch to first person. That's not always the way people do things. I'm sure there were reasons for that because that lets you get inside the character's head.
Yeah. So the chapters from Briar Woods perspective are in the
Mhm.
first person, and the rest of it is in the third person. And I think for me that I know that Briar Woods is a tricky character. She's very
Mhm.
flawed. She makes bad decisions. She made terrible decisions, in fact. And it's been really interesting reading reviews because some people really feel for her, and they know her. She's had some terrible experiences in her past that have led her to behave the way that she has, and she's a very conflicted, confused person. So I have a great love and sympathy for her, but I could also see how some people, and some people do, find her quite unlikable. Um,
Mhm.
so I suppose by putting her in the first person, I did want to allow the readers a little bit more insight into who she was and to what was motivating her, and to get really close to her in a way that if I hadn't done that, would we be able to have access to the same level of sympathy? I'm not sure.
Probably not. And the fact that you are inside of her, feeling her emotions, what she's thinking, how she's planning, there's a lot, surprising amount of emotion in this book. I mean, Rosamund feels very strongly protective of Jasmine, and obviously, well, I won't go into that part of it, but everybody has very strong feelings. That has a way of pulling us into the book more, and I'm sure that's fully intentional.
Yes, I think I get quite emotional when I'm writing. It can be quite exhausting because you do need to feel it. And I think for me, emotion is pacing as well. I think I don't deliberately think about, okay, how is this bit a bit slow? How am I going to improve the pacing? The pacing comes from the sort of the psychodrama of the interactions between the characters and the emotion that they're bringing to it. So it's very important to me that the emotion is authentic and real. Otherwise, I think the book would be a bit boring, to be honest.
One of the standard questions I have to ask everybody, and the way they put it is, are you a plotter or a pantser? In other words, do you plot in advance or do you write by the seat of your pants?
I plot
Uh,
completely, yes. I don't start writing a word until I have a full chapter breakdown. It's a big document with every chapter planned out. Now, this changes a huge amount throughout.
mm,
I might get to chapter seven and then realize that, oh, this is structure isn't going to work. And then I'll spend a day rewriting the plan. But I think I would feel a bit frightened by the concept of a blank page and just like going for it.
what, yeah, which reminds me, do you have a set plan for when you write early in the morning? Do you have so many words a day you have to get out? How does that work for you?
Well, so I wrote my first two novels, The Dance of the Dolls and The Sleeping Beauties, when I was working full time in an all boys boarding school,
Oh my
and
goodness.
in London. And I lived on the school site, and during the term time, I had no free time. I was teaching all day. I coached sport, I directed plays, so I had rehearsals on Sundays, I taught on Saturdays. So I could maybe do some reading and research. So I did all my writing in very intense bursts during my school holidays.
Mm.
So I would write a lot each day, sort of 3,000 words usually each day. And I'd go to a library usually to do that.
Mhm.
Then I'd be most focused. The problem with staying at home is always something to distract you.
Oh,
So I love going to libraries to write.
there's a famous story that I read years ago about a fellow who was a writer who was blocked, and he just said, he had the family go away for the weekend. He said and they come back traipsing and hoping to find it. And what he's doing is polishing the last of 385 pieces of silver instead of doing the writing.
Yeah, that is very relatable, definitely.
What do you hope? Well, first of all, what do you hope people take away from this book when they close it up? What do you want them to take away with them?
I hope that they will take away a unique Second World War story. I hope they will also have discovered something about dance and the world of dance that they perhaps didn't think they might be interested in before. And that maybe possibly the world of dance might be something that they want to immerse themselves in a little bit more, whether that is reading more about it, going to see a show, watching Dancing with the Stars, for example, and just exploring how important dance can be for people.
Right. Now, I know that it takes a long lead time between the time you finish, turn it in, run through all the revisions, etc. So you mentioned your first two books. I'm assuming the third one is just about done.
Yes, I have finished writing the third one. Yeah.
Okay. And is it a continuation? Should we look forward to that?
No, it's a bit of a departure actually. So it's not ballet themed at all. I felt like two ballet books was wonderful, but I didn't want to write another one. It's set in the 1960s about an ex-fashion model who develops an obsession with her psychotherapist. So it's a sort of historical thriller.
I sense a very large and long career for you out here. You are an exceptional writer, and I really appreciate that. Is there anything I haven't touched on you want to make sure? How to get a hold of you, blogs, websites, etc.
Yeah, I have a website. It's lucyashe.com, and I love to meet people on Instagram. Lucy Ashe underscore author is my Instagram, and the Sleeping Beauties came out a couple of weeks ago, and it's available now from all bookstores.
Thank you so much. It has been a real pleasure talking with you, a real pleasure reading the book as well. Our guest today, Lucy Ashe, the book is The Sleeping Beauty's highest possible recommendation. Thanks so much for your time with us today.
Thank you.